You know, in today's age, there is one thing that you can do to significantly accelerate yourself beyond the people that are around you, beyond the majority of people. And it's actually very simple, and it's not what you think it is. In today's society, everybody is regurgitating perspectives, regurgitating advice, regurgitating knowledge, even regurgitating thought patterns, habits, and actions. And we're regurgitating it from other people, or we're regurgitating it from a collective idea of what these things are. And when you take that time to separate yourself from all of that, that is when you really start to gain the advantage of blowing past people. And I'll explain what I mean. Your mornings are probably the most sacred thing that you could have each day. It's currently 6, a little bit past 6 right now, 6 in the morning. And I've been up since 4, and I have not checked my phone yet. I have not responded to an email yet. I have not done anything but sit with myself and get clearer on where I'm at, get clearer on what are my thought patterns like, get clear on what beliefs am I thinking right now and what beliefs do I currently need to change or adjust or reprogram. And it significantly accelerated my ability to step into a new identity and therefore shift my reality at such a faster pace. I am one of the biggest proponents of journaling. I think that that is probably the most powerful thing that you can do, because what you don't realize is the answers that you're looking for, the confusion that you have, the clarity to all of that, those answers, the clarity, the full understanding, that clear mindedness is already inside of you. And it's likely already been answered by something that you did in the past, which is why it's important for you to pick up the daily practice of journaling in the morning, because you'll start to write entries about your life, about where your mindset is at, about what you believe about yourself in these current moments. And these are the things that are going to give you answers when you don't even realize it. And when you go back and you look at those journal entries, you're gonna see, man, what I had a question for right now, or what I was unclear about, or what I was unsure about, I already answered it in this journal entry. And it's really amazing how your past can answer your future like that. Because really, it's just all within you. The answers are already all within you. You just have to find ways to break up the noise and all of the stuff that's around it to really get clear. And I recognized this morning. If you watched my last video, I talked about understanding the season that you're in. And even once you get to that level of understanding what season that you're in, you have to make sure that you don't get caught in semantics. And I'll explain what I mean. There are two things that we have to carry out when it comes to achieving a new outcome, a better state of reality, just a new identity, transforming, right? We have to have the intangible things, which are beliefs, mindset, the vision, right? The mission, the duty, the why. But then we also have to have the tangible, practical things, which is carrying out the actions, getting the task done, putting in the work. And you can't have one without the other. If you fall too far on the action side, you're not gonna have the awareness to know how to adjust and pivot and also take the best course of action, because you're not leaning on your higher faculties, you're focusing on do, and you're gonna end up just burning out and feeling stressful, and it's just gonna feel like it's a lot. On the other side, if you're too focused on higher thinking, visualizing, seeing yourself, listening to affirmations, doing all these other things to increase how you see your self-image, but that doesn't inspire you to take different types of actions, then you're just lying to yourself and you're mentally masturbating. So you have to have both, and they both integrate with each other. And you have to make sure once you identify what season that you're in, that you don't err too much on either side and you understand how they both integrate with each other. And I'll give you an example. For me, I recently moved out to South America, but my business, my agency, still operates back in the States. And for the longest time while I was out here, I had this belief that my agency could not thrive without me being there. Because when I was in the States, I was essentially a glorified freelancer. I was working all of the jobs. I was doing everything. I was getting the clients, working the jobs, fulfilling, doing everything. And when we had bigger projects, I would hire other people, but I never had an ecosystem. I never had any infrastructure. And I never thought forward of how do I delegate this so that way I don't have to be so in fulfillment and I have that location freedom to be able to move abroad. But I ended up making that choice without validating that beforehand, which I think was actually the blessing in disguise. And now that I have that understanding, when I was journaling 9 days ago, I wrote that the first step for me to get to where I want to be is to believe that the agency can thrive without me being there. And it's crazy how things work, because one thing that I recommend is when you start your daily practice of journaling, make sure that you always read a random entry before you start journaling. I always read a random entry. It doesn't have to be the entry from the day before. It can be an entry from 3 months ago. It doesn't matter. I just take my journal and I just flip it open. And whatever page it lands on, I read that entire entry before I start my new entry for the day. And I always notice that when I do that, there's some type of insight, there's some type of answer, or there's some type of clarity to something that I'm dealing with in the current moment. And it's really powerful because the words stay the same, but your perspective to those words change with time, which is incredibly powerful because it just links everything, right? It's crazy how a past version of yourself can answer a future question. It's crazy how that stuff works. But that's what I would recommend. Always do that. And when I was reading that journal entry from 9 days ago, I realized that that was the first step. I identified that that was the first step for me in my season of being able to have an agency that thrives without me, and I'm out of fulfillment. I have the location freedom, the financial freedom, I have everything. And I realized that that was the first step. The first step wasn't anything practical. The first step was having the belief that it can actually happen. Because deep down underneath, I didn't have that belief. And from that journal entry to 9 days forward, which is today, I was doing a lot of the practical things, right? So I started working on my mind. I started listening to different affirmations. I started to work on my mindset. I started to even journal throughout the week about who I am, the type of person that I am now because I have this belief. And I started carrying out a lot of different practical things and a lot of different practicalities that validated that belief, right? I called up my 2 strongest people that I've worked with when I was back in the States, and I said, hey guys, this is the vision for the business over the next year. Does that align with you guys? I need your support. They say, yeah, we're on board. I bought a storage unit for the equipment that we use for all of our shoots, when before I would just have the equipment on me the whole time and I would always bring the equipment to the shoot. Now there's a central location where our crew can go and get the equipment to fulfill on these shoots. I did a lot of other things throughout the week that were practical and were byproducts of me adopting that belief that the agency can thrive without me. But I noticed something interesting last night. I started feeling this anxiety. I started having these different types of thoughts come up, and I was subtly doubting what I was doing. I was subtly doubting the actions that I was taking. I was clinging to these thoughts of overwhelm, of doubt, of I don't know what the next step's supposed to be. How am I going to do this? How is this going to work? All of these different things. And I woke up this morning feeling that way too. And I felt like I didn't have clarity on what the next step was supposed to be. But the issue was that I was thinking about the next step being in practicalities. I was getting too caught up in the semantics. I was getting too caught up in, okay, what's the next step that I have to do? I know we have a team meeting today. I know I have to get this done, this, that. We have a webinar launch for this client. I have to write the scripts for the ads. I got to write the email copy. I'm thinking of all of these practicalities. And I got caught up in that so much because I was just doing it throughout the week that I forgot what the actual next step was. And it wasn't until I got reminded by my journal entry from 9 days ago when I started to realize, wait a second, the actual step was for me to believe that the agency could thrive without me. And when I thought about how much I did within 9 days, where it felt natural, where it felt effortless, where I unlocked so many different things about myself, I realized, undoubtedly, I have adopted this belief into my identity, my subconscious mind, into how I see myself, that this agency can thrive without me. That's no longer a question that I have. It's no longer something that I'm contemplating. I know for certain and for fact that the agency can thrive without me being there. And that was the next step. So now, rather than me getting caught up in the semantics of the practicalities of all of that, I have to ask myself, okay, I just took the next step of believing that the agency can thrive without me, and I carried it out through my habits, my thought patterns, my actions. Those were all byproducts of me accepting and adopting that belief over these past 9 days. Now, what is the true next step? Because the practicalities and the practical actions that you have to take are a part of a bigger overarching next step that you need to take, which is linked to your higher faculties. So you have to be able to identify where you're at and what calls for what. Because I was looking at the practical steps and actions that I was taking and using that as an indicator of my higher faculties and my higher vision. And that's dangerous because when I think about it from my higher vision, when I think about it from me moving through this season, that was not the next step. It wasn't these practicalities of implementation and operations and all these other things. It was, I need to believe that the agency can thrive without me. And all of the practical actions and steps and clarity that I got and insight came from me adopting that belief. And they were all byproducts that started to become natural and started to feel natural. So those are the things that I had to recorrect myself, but I wouldn't have been able to do it if I didn't see that journal entry from 9 days ago this morning. Which brings me back to the point of we have to really honor ourselves in the mornings, get present with ourselves, get present with God, and really define what our reality is supposed to be. Define who we're supposed to be. Because once you have that clarity and that awareness, you'll start to understand the difference between your higher faculties and your practical implementation that you need to carry out. And they serve two different functions, but they're integrated. And if you start to think that you're supposed to look for things in the practical actions that you carry out to validate what the next step is for your higher faculties, you're going to start getting confused. There's going to be some overwhelm, some overthinking, right? Some doubt. But now I'm like, okay, I already took the next step. So now I have to know what is the next step from a higher faculty lens, right? What's the next step that I have to take from that lens? I'm not going to look at the practicalities and start thinking about how are we going to scale? How are we going to get clients? How am I going to have enough cash flow to be able to fully hire my crew that I'm currently starting to train up? How am I going to implement leadership into the agency? How are we going to create an ecosystem, infrastructure? Like, I'm not thinking about that in terms of getting clarity on what the next step should be, because those are all practical implementation steps that are carried out from the higher level next step that I know I need to take. And I truly don't know what that is right now, but I know I'll probably receive it, if not today, then tomorrow morning when I journal again. Or it may already be buried in a previous journal entry. I don't know. But I know that it's going to come. And it's one of the things that has allowed me to really move with efficiency, effectiveness, and acceleration. Acceleration is the most important key because a lot of people get caught up in one of these two places, one of these two spaces. They either get too caught up on the higher faculty and then they don't implement enough, or they get so focused on action, 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 implementation, implementation, that they don't take time to audit whether they're actually taking the bigger next step, the higher next step for themselves. And that's what is extremely important because they're two separate functions and they play two separate roles, but they both have to come together. And when you can identify that and you can become aware of that and clear on that, that is when you will literally be able to outpace everybody else that's around you, because everybody else is going to fall into one of two categories. They're going to over leverage one of the two categories, or they're going to be regurgitating perspectives, thought patterns, habits, beliefs, actions that they see somebody else taking, but they don't have that clarity of knowing what that actually is and what it actually means for them in their life because they haven't taken the time in the mornings to get clear on that. So if there's one thing that I can recommend that you do that will completely accelerate the rest of this year and completely set you ahead of everybody going into the next year, is that you have to treat your mornings like they are gospel. And you have to treat your mornings like nobody else comes before you, right? Except God. But nobody else comes before you in your mornings. Not your business, not your family, not your partner, not your kids, not anything. Because you have to get clear on what the higher next step looks like for the situation, the phase, the season of life that you're in, and what the practical implementation is as a byproduct of that higher level next step. And once you can start to get clear on those things and you're journaling every day, you'll start to realize that you no longer have to overthink or strategize so much or have this fear that everything has to go right or you always have to get something right, because you know that regardless of what happens, you're going to be fine and the answers are already going to be tucked and stored away in these journal entries. So I recommend absolutely everybody that has not already adopted a daily journaling practice in the morning to do that. Do it with awareness, do it with intention, and I guarantee for the people who do, because there are gonna be people that watch this video, they're gonna feel good, they're gonna be like, oh man, that's so great, you just unlocked something for me, and they're not gonna do shit. So if you're the person that actually carries this out for a consistent period of time, I guarantee that you are going to accelerate past everybody throughout the rest of this year and into the next season.